Hello and welcome to Florida Basketball Hour. I am Neil Blackman. Saturday Down South. The Florida Gators are the national champions. Eric Fawcett for the third time. Gator Country, Burner Ball, various places. Florida is national champs for the third time. Defeats Houston. Gators beat Houston 65-63. To be super cheesy, dad jokey about it, we will always remember the Alamodome.
Yeah, people appreciate that one for sure. But it is true. I mean, in a setting that really turned out to still feel like more Florida fans than Houston fans, as much as there was some thought that maybe there would be more Houston fans scooping up some of the maybe Duke tickets that were sold at the end. It was just an incredible scene of Florida fans there to support a team that was able to be victorious in a way that seemed just really consistent with the other games of the NCAA tournament, where there was times where you thought that the game was over, you thought that the Gators were out of it, and they found a way to come back and win. So it was somewhat of a perfect embodiment of the tournament. And I also thought it was somewhat of a poetic embodiment of the season for the Gators, a team that is analytically focused and using those tools to maximize every single possession. And who do they get matched up with in the championship game? A team that could not be more opposite in Houston, who doesn't take shots at the rim, that doesn't shoot a lot of threes, that shoots the mid-range jump shot more than anyone, going up a team in the Gators who plays the exact opposite style. And of course, I have my bias, not just towards the Gators, but towards a style of basketball that is more analytically driven and modern. So even if Florida wasn't in this game and it was some modern analytical team versus a team that is old school and rejects those notions, I would have a bias towards the team that plays an analytical modern style. But ultimately, I wrote about this at Gator Country, but in the ultimate battle of team that is all toughness and old school intensity and a rejection of modern analytics versus a team in Florida that maximizes every single possession. Houston ended up taking 17 mid-range jump shots, plays that netted them 10 total points on 17 plays. And there was, of course, Neil, a very funny moment, in my opinion, where Houston had the ball with 46 seconds left, down by two, and or down, and they're inbounding, and the announcers are like, "Oh, do you think they go for the 2-for-1 here?" And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not sure that Kelvin Sampson knows what a 2-for-1 is. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful or facetious, but like for a guy that's just doesn't look at those, doesn't use analytics and doesn't look at those types of numbers, they of course do not use the 2-for-1, which would have put themselves in a great position to maybe win this game. And that was a big reason Florida was able to win. And so I just thought that was about as poetic a finish as could happen, both because Florida won in the tournament, the championship game. They won the way they won in several tournament games where you thought they were dead at one point, which they were in a number, or we thought they were in a number of games. And then just so poetic for a staff that really believes in a particular style of play to go against the complete opposite and come out victorious. I thought there was just a couple of things that really supported the team of destiny narrative that I've been at least personally pushing for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, our guy Jared says it seems like they were going to hit every one of their floaters based on their make. It really did, like early in the game. It felt like, especially like Juwan Roberts, like started, I think he made his first two. And I was like, oh, Juwan Roberts' legacy game incoming. And then that's, certainly not how it ended up happening. And I will say, like, okay, I'm trying to think of how to frame this. So, well, you know what? Before I get too much into that, like, did you enjoy this game? Like, obviously you enjoyed the outcome, but like, what camp are you in? And I know your feelings on Houston. I think everybody that follows you, whether Burner Ball here, like, we get it. Kelvin Sampson called your guy Evan Mia the stats guy. which gives you an idea of where he's at on like modern analytics. But were you in like the Goodman, John Fanta camp? Like you just like this game anyway? Or were you kind of like, oh man, this game was not great, but that's what Houston wanted it to be?
Yeah, like I mean, it was a college basketball game, so it was a clash of styles, and I do think that's what makes it interesting. Like I know I told you, or me and Neil were texting before the Tennessee Houston game, and I just mentioned that I thought the game was going to be absolutely disgusting and foul, and I
Yeah.
personally thought it was, and it's one of those things that if you get two of those teams playing that style of play, I don't like it. But I think that when you have at least we have one team playing that style and then another team playing the literal complete opposite, then at least it makes it interesting in that sense. But yeah, I mean, I actually did find the first half. I found the first half to actually be really good because I do
Yeah.
think, again, just objectively speaking, I thought that Houston's defense was incredible. And just from like an objective observer, when Florida was turning the ball over or missing shots, I thought it was a lot of times was due to really good defense from Houston. And I do really enjoy watching Houston defend. I just hate watching them on the other side of the floor. But I actually do really like watching them defend. And for the first 20 minutes, they had some just beautiful defensive possessions. So I think I actually probably enjoyed the game a lot more than people would expect. Because yeah, I do like how Houston defends, but it's just on the other end of the floor. And I know we are not trying to look at this from the objective observer standpoint. That's not what a lot of people are looking for at this moment. They're certainly not looking from a Houston standpoint. But man, if I was a Houston fan, I would just be disgusted at the way that the team plays offense. And there's to me, there's still no reason why you can't keep all the philosophy and identity and culture that they have while still like running sets in which you are attempting to score the ball. Like they're not even trying to score. They're just trying to throw it on the backboard and get offensive rebounds. And we saw that. And again, going to Jared's comment just a little bit earlier, just because I did actually, I had it in front of me from when I was writing about it. They hit their first 3 floaters of the game and then they missed their next 6. So yeah, I think that yeah, that's so again, it's just one of those things that like the numbers are going to bear out. Me, the ultimate floater hater, didn't matter that I saw 3 in a row being made by Houston. I know it was going to bounce out, and ultimately they had 6 points on 9 floaters. So that's of course not a very good points per possession,
Wow.
especially when if they continue to attack, they would probably get foul, earn some foul calls. And actually, to be honest, some of those initial floaters that they hit where as far as floaters go, still good looks. Whereas, and then you look at their mid-range jump shots, a lot of those were just not very good looks, and that's why they hit some early, and things really normalized, and they stopped hitting them at the end. So that was really again one of my takeaways, and it's one of those things that I would love to talk to Florida staff privately because I wouldn't try to get them on the record talking about this, but I'm like, this has to be hilarious for you. Like knowing what you guys know about analytics and then watching how Houston plays on the other end. But anyways, it is very fitting. And I never want to sound like I'm taking away from a team's championship run by saying this, because it seems like every team that wins a championship gets lucky at some point. But it was again another reminder that I just love this matchup so much more than I would have liked a Duke matchup. And I know I said that I thought Florida was going to win by 9 in our pregame pods or our preview pods. And obviously they did not hit that, but I think everyone could kind of see a world where Florida wins that game by 9, given that again, Florida didn't necessarily play their best basketball once again, and still found a way to win. If Walter Clayton maybe has a regular Walter Clayton game, then maybe I could have been proven right with a 9-point win, which I projected. So wasn't really close to my score prediction, wasn't close to the 9 I expected, but again, I think people can kind of see why I was ultimately pretty confident in this matchup, when I know a lot of people are also tweeting at you, Neil, at the show account, saying like, oh, that's like kind of weird for Eric to be so confident in a matchup like that. And while it ended up being pretty close for comfort in a game that the Gators certainly could have lost, I think people saw what I was seeing that pointed to a good matchup for the Gators.
Yeah, man. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like it felt like And you're right. First of all, shout out to the Gator fans. And like, I'm not naive enough to think that you or I had anything to do with this. I know we were both on podcasts where like we implored people to go and see this team and support this team. And I thought that Florida fans did just an extraordinary job, man, of like getting on the road. Like Gator fans they filled up Raleigh. They were outnumbered in Nashville. Like they played a road game in the SEC championship because everyone in Tennessee with reliable transportation made it to Bridgestone Arena that day. But then they went to Raleigh and they had big numbers, even with Duke there. They went to San Francisco and Rocco Miller, our buddy, was telling us he couldn't believe how many Florida fans were out there. It was like, and then UF's a national university, so there's a lot of West Coast Gators, but there were a lot of Gator fans. Like when Florida rallied against Texas Tech, it was loud. And then, last night, like it was 60-40 Houston, but you never would have known it because Florida fans they were loud, especially when they started to come back. Jake Sillick, former Rowdy Reptiles president, said this team just did whatever it took on the day. Whatever style the game was being played in, they would find a way to adjust and win. Look, yeah, I wrote about it. Like the greatness of this Florida team is that they could win any type of game. And that's something they grew into, Eric, at least in my opinion. Like they weren't like earlier in the year, if you had played Florida in a half-court game that was just like really, really, let's just play straight up in the half court and we're going to limit your transition and we're going to make you play deep into the shot clock and your possessions. Like that was, I don't want to say kryptonite for a team that went 36-4, but those games were hard for Florida, right? And they had to win 3 of them in the NCAA tournament, including the national championship game against the team that's the best in America at that. And like Florida won the national title last night, and they didn't lead in the second half until there were 46 seconds left in the college basketball season. It was the 3rd NCAA tournament game where they trailed entering the final media timeout. It was the 4th NCAA tournament game where they were behind by multiple points in multiple possessions in the second half. They were behind by 9 against Auburn. And they did this. They just found ways to win. And to like Eric's point, like Houston doesn't run much stuff offensively. Like it is literally like a brush screen and an entry pass. And then get the ball up and see if we can rebound. And if you help, we will pass and we will shoot. That's it. But like the way they defend is beautiful. They are so damn good defensively, Eric. And that was the thing that was the amazing thing in the first half. Like, and it's one thing to watch it on TV. I'm telling you, it's one thing to watch it on TV. It's another thing to see it against they did this to Duke in the second half. They did it to Florida, the top 2 KenPom offenses. Like Houston's help defense is absurd. Like it's not just the length, though they're incredibly physically gifted in that regard. They have guys who seem undersized. You look at the roster card on paper and you're like, Florida's bigger. And then they have these 7-foot wingspans everywhere. But they get after you and they get into you. They're so physically imposing. They put 2 on the ball almost the entire first 20 minutes of the game. And then they sprint out the short roller and they eliminate any quick hitter actions that you can hit. And so it's just like, it's so frustrating to play offense against them, and they speed you up just naturally. And so Alex Condon has like 3 travels, and people are like, Alex Condon is unplayable. And it's like, well, he's trying to make plays. He's trying to make reads. He's trying to make passes. But, you just get sped up against them. Like, it's not really avoidable. And then, the other thing that they do is, like, I thought Kondo did a really good job leaking out. You actually did video on that earlier in the tournament. And Florida kind of exploited how hard Houston crashes. And it was nice to see like Alex show up and get a dunk and make a couple free throws. But, after they sprint out to those short loaders, then they also run through your passing lanes. So like they're playing the ball on the catch, and it's easy like when you haven't dealt with that before. And it's like Tennessee on steroids. It's so easy to get sped up. And I thought everybody but Will Richard was sped up in the first half for Florida. And Will probably not, because he's so long. And then obviously he was locked in. I mean, it's Will Richard legacy game. I joked around and said, I think Fawcett, I don't even know if I was joking. Like, I think Fawcett and I might need to do a Will Richard legacy Patreon. Patreon.com/Florida BB Hour. Because you talk about a guy who saved his best for last. But yeah, Florida was so out of sorts. But Houston, and it's not to take anything away from the way Florida guarded. We can talk about that. But Houston had their chance. They made threes against Tennessee. And so when they stuffed Tennessee, they ran out way in front of them. They couldn't do that against Florida. They couldn't hit shots. And so the Gators were down 3 at halftime, and Elijah Martin, Tommy Houck, and Walter Clayton had 4 points. And I texted 3,000 people as many text messages as I could respond to at halftime. And to the extent that the Alamodome's crappy internet, any of that was affected, I'm just like, Florida's going to be, they've got to be, I didn't know they were going to be fine, but I knew if you're Todd Golden, you went into that locker room and you're like, guys, we can't play much worse than we just did.
Yeah, I think given that Walter Clayton was not at his best, and Florida kind of struggled to give him any opportunities in the first half. Given that I thought that Alex Condon was arguably Florida's second best player this entire season, and given that Elijah Martin was someone that everyone was really banking on to be like the March guy who would come alive in the NCAA tournament, for it to be Will Richard, who was Florida's best player in a championship game, is super cool. And I mean, you can also add that to the list of poetic things about this finish, in addition to what I was mentioning before, just the fact that it was Florida's Todd Golden's first recruit from the transfer portal that was the guy who closed it out at the end with the best game. And I think just the way you put it was best. It just seemed like everyone was incredibly rattled, and whether it be by the moment or by the way Houston was playing, there was just a lot of guys playing scared. And for it to be Will Richard, who was just so calm when the ball hit his hand, so calm knocking down shots, it was just exactly what the Gators needed. And it really was anyone who's going to have their best game of their, well, I don't want to say best game of their career, but whoever's going to be the best player in a national championship game, that kind of becomes their legacy game regardless. Yeah, he's had more points, but in
Yes.
a game, but and anyone who plays their best, especially given the circumstances. And again, I appreciate as well that he was someone who didn't try to do too much, because again, I do feel like we have seen that a little bit from some guys, where it's again, if your number one option isn't there, there's guys that start doing a little bit too much. I think people know what I think about Elijah Martin trying to be a playmaker and put the ball on the floor. And we saw what happened when the ball got short rolled to Alex Condon. He wasn't trying to do too much. It was just still crazy looking back at those travels, but just again, crazy because he was turning over, not trying to do too much. But Will Richard didn't try to say, now I'm going to start trying to take a guy off the bounce, or, hey, come get me with a ball screen, I'm going to try to attack. He still played within himself. He just did what he did really well. And again, that hole could have been really deep at the half if not for Will Richard doing awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, Will kept Florida in the game. He absolutely kept Florida in the game. And look, when they got behind 12, the ESPN probability of Florida winning was 7%. So, and it was 7%, and I don't know how much that bakes in who you're playing. But I know it bakes in the number of possessions so far. And so it was 42-30, and we hadn't quite gotten to the first media timeout of the second half. But you're looking up and you're like, Florida's playing Houston, and they're down by 12 points, and there's 16 minutes to go. And I will say, like, one thing that Florida did, and it was one of the things that, like, if you're watching and you're like, well, where is there a path back? And it was Houston had 5 offensive rebounds in the first 2 minutes of the game, and then they had 1 the rest of the first half. And like Florida did a really good job of competing on the glass. They actually ended up winning the rebounding battle by 1, 40-39. They had 8 offensive rebounds. Houston ended with 15, but if you dive like deeper into that, like some of those were on air balls. Point is, there weren't a ton of contested like 50-50 rebounds that Florida lost after the first couple minutes of the game. And so some of that was probably that JoJo Tugler was in foul trouble. I thought that affected things quite a bit. But, credit Florida for getting him into foul trouble. The point is, like, there was never like a moment in that game until about midpoint in the second half where Florida had one of their kind of patented a bunch of points really fast runs. Like, it was just kind of this slow glacial march back. And then I thought Walt got fouled on a 3 that would have given Florida a chance to tie at the free throw line. And then Cryer hit that unbalanced floor in transition, which made me wonder, like, why Kelvin Sampson was so afraid to run. Because, like, I thought some of Houston's best offensive moments came when they got out and ran a little bit. And, like, they did that against Arizona, who they beat a bunch of times. Like, they had games where they scored more because they got out in transition, but they were so determined to not run with Florida. But it was almost like Kelvin wasn't paying attention to what was happening in the game to me. Does that make sense? Like, because like LJ Cryer hits unbalanced shot. They had another possession in the second half. The only other time that they ran, their 5 transition points in the second half. And it was like Florida miss, Jawan Roberts break, and then pass back, Cryer layup. And I was just like, they just scored in 9 seconds. Like, why aren't they doing this more? Like, making Florida get back and defend themselves. And they didn't. And so anyway, that foul kind of unbalances things, and the Gators go back behind 6. And that was when Florida had that like boom, boom spurt and got it back at 48-48. And then I think Cryer or Sharp hit a 3, and then Walt had the back-to-back 3-point plays. And it was, finally Walt made a basket at the under 8. I don't know if Clayton, I can't say what the impact of him making that layup was and just actually getting on the board. What I can say is the second 3-point play I thought was gargantuan because, first of all, he took a hell of a bump from Cryer. Like, that was a hard foul. And then I thought, second of all, like, that was what impressed me is, like, every time Florida punched in the Auburn game, you mentioned it, like, Florida just felt so inevitable. And last night, at least to me, like, it didn't totally feel inevitable. Like, Houston would make a 3-pointer. They had so many answers over and over again. And that's why I enjoyed the game.
Yeah, it was definitely nice too, as much as Walter Clayton wasn't able to hit a bunch of his big dagger step back threes. His finishes at the rim were quite vintage Walter Clayton, and I feel like he's, again, you can even look at the numbers. I don't feel like he's a great finisher at the rim, but there's things that he does particularly well, and that is taking contact, and the way that he had that body control on that and one to still find the rim and like calmly lay it in while taking a big shot was pretty massive. So I thought that was still some nice moments, and I really do feel like it had somewhat of an impact on the team, and it certainly the crowd that was just waiting for Walter Clayton to do anything. That was probably the biggest outside of the final minutes was probably the biggest. The crowd kind of exploded, at least how it came across on television. I just think that, of course, every Florida fan is just like waiting for a Walter Clayton moment. So I thought that was pretty big. And I'd have to imagine that the team was also feeling that same way too, whether or not that's something they would feel subconsciously or not, when a guy has been one of the best players in the country and been the best player in the NCAA tournament and putting up huge numbers, for him to be quiet and have some of those misses in the first half be pretty poor from deep was that's got to be a little nerve wracking, as a teammate, just wondering if, like, oh, is this the team that's actually going to slow down our guy? So big moments there. And of course he knocked down the free throws down the stretch that were pretty big. So certainly nice that he did have a stretch of really good basketball. And again, not that he was bad in the first half. He just was like honestly, again, my issue, and it's nice to not have to talk about this too much given the Florida won, but I just felt like Florida had no real attempt at getting him involved in the first half. It was like, hey, Clayton, go get out and get your isolation shots up. And when they didn't fall, I don't feel like they had anything else for him to try to get him involved. And then you saw them run that stagger twist play late in the second to get him that clean three off a screen. And it was certainly nice that they had that at the end, but you probably would have, I just would have started running some stuff for that earlier, but of course, hey, it all worked out. Florida won, but that couple of stretches of getting to the rim, getting fouled, finishing strong, that'll definitely be some still nice memories of Clayton in this championship game.
Yeah, well, so Will Richards told me that he thought, like, it calmed them down, to your point. He didn't say calmed us down. He said when Walt made the layup, we relaxed. Because, we knew that he's one of the best players in the country, and, like, he saw the ball go in. And I actually thought, like, the drive and free throws he made that made it, like, I don't know, 42-34 or something like that, were probably when he kind of started to feel the game. I really do believe, like, sometimes a great player just needs to see – they just need a moment where it's like, okay, calm down. You're just playing basketball. But, again, like, that was because Condon and Chenyalu were good, and they got Tugler into foul trouble. Like, those layups came – Terrence Arsenault was in the game because Tugler was on the bench, And that was so huge. And that's the thing about Kondo is, like, there were all these tweets, and I was trying to respond to some tweets, and I mainly tweeted during the media timeouts, but, like, Condon recovered, man. Like, he bounced back. He played his best game of the NCAA tournament. He had 12 points. He had 7 rebounds. He had 4 steals. He was super active defensively. And, he did enough. He did enough just getting people into foul trouble and making plays, I thought, to be impactful, right? And that, I don't know, that mattered, I think, because that foul trouble was a big deal. And you know who else I thought was awesome? And, like, we need to talk about him because everybody knows, like, my bread and butter would just be to brag about Florida landing Elijah Martin in the portal and let Fawcett cook, like, talking about all the ways that he's not Superman, and that's fine. But Denzel Aberdeen, man, like, Emmanuel Sharp did not have a good game. And Denzel Aberdeen got that assignment because it was Elijah with Milos Uzan a lot. And then Denzel, some on Cryer, but a lot of chasing Emmanuel Sharp around when he was on the floor. And then he had the 2, like, really tough finishes, Eric, where Florida just needed buckets. And it was like Denzel Aberdeen is one of those guys who has the ability to bully ball. And he certainly is unafraid, And I think, to your point, like, I do think Florida was scared a little bit, and Denzel Aberdeen was not afraid. Like, he did not play scared. And those things were huge in the second half as Florida was kind of clawing their way back. And then obviously Denzel hits a massive free throw at the end of the game that gave Florida at least the security blanket of knowing that, hey, if Houston doesn't go for the win, the worst they can do is they can't beat us with a 2. They can beat us with a 3. He missed one of them. But when he missed the first one, I was like, oh, is he going to miss them both? And, like, it's gutty to get get in there and make that second one. So I wanted to shout out Denzel because I thought it was a really good Denzel Aberdeen game.
Well, and even I think you mentioned that free throw he had late, just to suggest that he's on the floor with 19 seconds left or whatever it was, under 30 seconds when he got on the floor in that situation. That's like honestly, in a lot of ways, if anyone in their college basketball career finds themselves in a position where they're put on the floor for a huge defensive possession, that's incredible and says a
Such a
lot
good point.
about so again, it's one of those things that even if you would have asked me before the game, is if you would have said, Eric, do you think Denzel Aberdeen's on the floor with under a minute left in a one possession game, I would have said no, I don't believe so. So for him to for him to be out there and like you said, calmly knock that one down is big. And again, I think that he's someone who can get sped up and try to do a little bit too much, and has done that at different times this season. So for him to play one of his most calm games when a lot of guys were not playing so calmly, I thought that was really excellent. And I thought that role he settled into versus a guy who came in and really tried to make things happen and score and put up a ton of shots. He just played exactly what the Gators needed from him in the championship game. And like, I'll be honest with you, when he first checked into the game, I was scared he was going to start trying to break guys down one-on-one and start to be the one who was going to say like, oh, like, team needs to score here. Like, I'm going to be the one to try to do it. And I thought all his field goal attempts were pretty good ones. And you saw that with the pretty efficient night from the floor, even though it wasn't a ton of shots, but really, really good. And of course, I've been the one who said all year long that I thought that depth was overrated. Of course, you do see ultimately the Gators end up going 8 deep, but yeah, still got getting good minutes from your 6 to 8 is still really, really important. But as we saw, as much as would have been cool to see what a Klobzar could do in this game, or some of these other guys, it was down to the tighter rotation for sure. And of course, Florida did get good minutes from those guys.
I got this comment from Tanner Lefevre up that I agree with this. Like, no, Florida did not do to Houston what Houston did to Duke. Like, yes, Florida took their last lead with 46 seconds to go. Yes, Florida was down by double digits, but there were 16 minutes to go when Florida was down by double digits. And as Tanner's out, they get tied at the under 8. Now, here I thought Kevin Hovde drew up a great play to get Walt that 3, and his 60-second game with a made 3. He sure waited till the last minute to figure that one out, Eric. But the double screen action that Florida ran to get the triple, which that was Florida's last field goal.
Yeah, that's another. I mean, oh yeah, maybe you have that stat in front of you. I heard it from maybe Matt Norlander on a podcast today, but how Florida won the game. I think they had like one field goal in the last 3 minutes and 30 seconds. I might be just completely off. I mean, I could pull up the play-by-play here, but I mean, I'm curious what exactly if Florida had that one kind of in the bag kind of going in, but that's something that talking to some coaches, talking about some of the things I did for the burner prepping for this game, something that Houston also does with their defense that's just very like traditional is like they're going to lock and trail you off screens. They aren't going to be a team that switches everything. So against the team that is going to trail and try to fight through screens, to run that twist action where the first shooter curls and then pins in for the first screener who ultimately gets open in Walter Clayton. I do think it was, of course, it's a rock solid play at any level of basketball, but yeah, particularly against Houston with how they guard. It was a really good play. I need to pull it up for myself just to watch it again and see if I missed anything in particular. But this is a team that has not really ran a lot of screening actions all season long, and I think I kind of hoped that they would a little bit more. But Yeah, as we watch it here, it's that horns action. I know this is going to make for great podcasting, but people who are on Patreon and have seen me talk about this play and formation that the Gators use
Yeah.
will this will be familiar. But they have the horns, they enter it into Thomas Hauk. That was Walter Clayton passed that ball. So then he sprints past Condon and sets the initial pin down for Will Richard. It looks like a stagger for Will Richard, but instead of coming off the two screens, the stagger, the Walter Clayton screen followed by the Alex Condon screen, he simply curls and pins down for Walter Clayton, and then Condon also screens, so it turns into a stagger for Walter Clayton, and it was wide open. When I say wide open, like there was literally not even a hand up from anyone as I look at the still image. So
Yeah.
Still haven't done the film breakdown for the Patreon. I got a very, very funny message from one of our supporters, Ed. I should try to pull it up, but I don't know if people feel the feel the same way. But he says, expecting a film breakdown, Eric, you could literally make the film breakdown The Irishman in length, and I'd watch it twice. Give us an intermission. And that really cracked me up. So I will do that film study at some point. I thought everyone would probably want to soak in the game for a little bit, and then we can review it in a few days. But that'll be something that to look back at some plays, because Florida actually did, again, as much as I have not been particularly high on a lot of Florida's execution coming out of timeouts in their half court offense. Generally, they got stuff that worked in the game that mattered. And I think the cleanest one was this Walter Clayton 3, where one of the best shooters in the country, admittedly one that gets most of his threes off the dribble and not off pin downs, still got a absolutely wide open look where a Houston player didn't even get a hand up. So that one worked pretty well.
Yeah, no, look, they ran one for Will Richard in the first half too. A little screening action to get Will open for a free three. They also had a couple different after timeout plays, including one of the Walt Clayton layups that was same horns look. That they just had a nice pass from the big. I don't remember if it was Hauk or Condon. I think it was Hauk that hit Clayton on out of that horns look and set up the layup and the foul on the help. But, there were some nice offensive moments for the Gators in this game. They won it, though, with defense. I mean, Houston's last 4 possessions, I know everybody's been talking about it, but turnover. The second and the last possession we're going to talk about it. I'm sure Eric is chomping at the bit to talk about what happened on the last possession. The second to last possession was the masterpiece, though. Because I thought Jawan Roberts set a good screen, and they got LJ Cryer downhill towards the basket, and Will Richard just made a phenomenal play and help. It was just, first of all, the guts to reach there, the way that the game was being officiated in the second half. And then to get the ball and have it go off Cryer and the turnover. That was just magnificent defense by Florida.
Yeah. And I will be honest. I thought that given just how poor I think Houston's offense is throughout the game. I think Florida was defending really well, but it was also just when Houston is just so bad offensively, it's sometimes hard to know exactly what exactly how good the defense was. But obviously, like you said, just a pretty solid show from Condon on a high pick and roll. Wasn't really a drop, wasn't at the level, kind of the flat hedge angles him off, and Houston was just so stagnant, and that was something that ultimately turned to a guy dribbling off his leg. And then the last play, I actually didn't mind the last play, again, as much as I've been very rude to Houston's offense. I do think the last play was pretty good to run. I also really like that it was an action that had multiple looks at a 3. So of course they first have that pistol stagger back. Their spacing on it was really poor, which allowed Will Richard to recover. Then they have that elevator screen. And what's again, what makes this funny to me is Walter Clayton was like so slow to react to this play. If you go watch it again, Walter Clayton was so slow to react to it. And in another instance,
Yeah.
if they set a better elevator screen, that one is wide open. But instead, the execution is way off. No one catches a body, and you do see that kind of explosion from Clayton as an athlete. And he would have blocked that shot if it went up. And instead, Sharp had to, of course, just put the ball down. And I mean, man, as a Houston fan, to watch just 3 seconds come off the clock as the ball is bouncing 2 inches from Emmanuel Sharp's hands because he can't touch it, that's got to be just like one of the most agonizing, just an absolutely agonizing way to lose the game. And again, another just like kind of lasting image for me, not necessarily, again, not just because it's like a basketball thing. I'm not trying to be rude to these Houston fans, but seeing Sharp throw the ball down and just has to let that ball bounce. And he is literally just like an inch from the ball, but he can't touch it because it'll be a travel if he does. And then Condon comes flying in to secure it. And like a hands team on an onside kick. And I thought that, or actually, I mean, I actually could have made an Australian rules football reference there, but I think everyone's got enough Australian rules football references.
I love it.
For the season. I think everyone's heard enough, but yeah, that was nice for Florida, who again did get dragged into a street fight with a team that wants to play in the back alley. So they were the ones that were able to get some key stops, and I do think it was the one you mentioned first, even more than the Emmanuel Sharp not quite travel. I do think it was the one you mentioned first that was actually the better and more impactful defensive possession.
Yeah, Tanner, by the way, did confirm that it was Houck who hit Clayton on the after timeout horn set. And yeah, that's what I mentioned. He was able to make the pass easier because Houston only had the one big on the floor. So like Todd adjusted by going smaller, and then Houston got in foul trouble. And so Todd could go bigger again. And then Florida was able to kind of climb back. But yeah, I mean, Golden used his depth brilliantly, I thought. And that was that. On the last play, so 2 points. And because I got to talk about Elijah Martin because he's the national champion now. So he just they had him on Uzan most of the night. And I love Milos Uzan. And I'm pretty sure if it wasn't Fawcett can correct me and just say I don't remember that. But I think I texted Fawcett at some point in February and was like, I kind of like what Milos Uzan brings to Houston. Again, it wasn't like, oh, Florida could play Houston in the national title. I think we were talking about something totally unrelated. And I said, well, I kind of like Milos Uzan. And that's because he did give them somebody who was a little different. And most of the year, Florida would start Elijah on the opposing point guard. Right? The Auburn game was kind of an anomaly because he did not play on Denver Jones much. He played on Pettiford a lot, which wasn't a great matchup for him, but he just competed his butt off. So Uzan was terrible. He made one basket with Martin on the floor the whole game. And that's how Martin finished plus 10, which was the second highest figure in the basketball game. But Uzan finished 2 of 9, 0 of 4 from 3. He only made one field goal with Martin on the floor. And so I thought on the last possession that I thought to Eric's point, Clayton got lost. He was in no man's land. Actually, if you pause it at 5 seconds, Eric, you can see Walt is the only guy in the paint. Mm-hmm. It's what is he doing down there? And my angle of it was terrible, right? But they're Juwan Roberts sets the laziest elevator screen ever. And I think that almost helped because instead of screening anyone from Florida, he almost screened the recovery help. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So by the time Will Richards' length, and I'm in here play acting so that you guys can see. So Will Richard so Martin pushes Uzan farther out than he wants to be. I think they wanted Milos to be much deeper. And then Cryer gets the ball, and he probably wants to get that ball to Sharp a little quicker, I think. But Richard's longer than him, and he made that pass a little bit difficult. But Sharp is still wide open because Clayton is in the paint doing God knows what. But the screen is so lazy that, I mean, and it was a great recovery closeout, right? But it was only great because, like, I don't think Sharp saw Clayton. I really don't. Like, I think he caught, you know what I'm saying?
He probably pump fakes, or he probably pump fakes and sidesteps if he saw him coming.
Sure. Like, if he sees him, it's an easier pump fake and drive. And then I don't know I think it was Malik Grady that tweeted something like he had a frame and it was like, if he pump fakes and gets by him, it's 2-on-1 with Alex Condon there. And like Florida's cooked. Probably. But I do think the elevator screen was so bad that the help, like the recovery for Clayton probably surprised Sharp a little bit. And then, yeah, like the other thing is if I'm Emmanuel Sharp, and it's easy for me to say, but I'm just grabbing that ball. Like, whatever.
Right.
Like, take the traveling violation.
Save some time.
And make Florida inbound the basketball like you did to Duke. You know, I know Florida had their press breaking group out there, but, you know, that's a hard inbounds pass on that side. So I don't know. That's probably what I would do. It's not as hard as like under the basket when you can't move, but it's not easy. And, you know, maybe you get something there. Who knows? But for me, like, it was almost like the bad screen by Roberts did everything because it made it easier for Clayton to recover, even though he was kind of a step slow. And then I just have to say, like, without a question, there's definitely some poetry in, like, we heard for, I don't know, all week once Houston made the Final Four. How many times did people see like a repost or retweet of the Houston loose ball drill?
Oh yeah.
And so for Florida to win the national title on a recovery help closeout and then diving for a loose ball, like, what an amazing
on the ground. That's funny. I didn't actually think about that. That's so true.
What an amazing homage to Kelvin Sampson.
Well, like, and even like it was funny too. I mean, in addition to the tweet that everyone was seeing, I think that there was someone who had a tweet that was, you know, circulating, got retweeted a bunch, that was like a Houston basketball practice must be just like guys diving on the floor and getting punched in the face, or, you know, I'm obviously not doing it justice at all. And it was kind of like, yeah, that actually is. And once you start to see images of their practice, that's what you'll actually see. And of course, shortly after, then you saw, you know, guys diving into chairs and the ball getting 20 feet out of bounds, but they're playing no outs, like, just get the ball. So yeah, again, I know people are looking for more of a Florida slant here than just a general slant, but it certainly looked like Houston was like Kelvin Sampson maybe finally gave up the pen to an assistant there for the final play. Someone drew up something pretty good, but because they just like, they don't run set plays ever. And then when, you know, you point out, I forget who you mentioned, you said it 10 times and now I don't remember it, even though I just watched it, but whoever didn't catch Clayton with the screen because of poor execution. I mean, that's just like, it looked like guys who are not used to running set plays, trying to run a set play. And of course they didn't execute it super well. And Florida, of course, guarded the first side of that action really well. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Florida was terrible. And honestly, I'm not even saying that Walter Clayton was terrible on this play. I think that it was a smart play to have that stagger back and then have a second option to the elevator. That is really good play. I mean, I was stunned to see that from Houston, despite the fact that they then just didn't execute it particularly well. And I do love the point that it was Alex Condon first on the floor to seal the game when Houston is first on the floor is their big thing. And I mean, it's such like the most intense moment of Sharp's life is he thinks he's about to take a 3 for the win in a national championship game. And suddenly he puts the ball on the floor because he sees Walter Clayton at the last second. So I'm not being like, oh yeah, he should have like calmly done this, but I was gonna say, I would have done one more and see Alex Condon sprinting for the ball. I just would have ran and checked him and taken a loose ball foul and put Alex Condon to the line. And so there's pretty much anything would have been better
Yeah.
than just letting the ball drop. But I also understand. I mean, man, in that moment, they're trying to execute a play. Emmanuel Sharp thought he had a wide open three to try to win a championship, and suddenly he had Walter Clayton with his hand right there in his in his face. So yeah, tough one for Sharp, who was close to having a really good moment of glory if a teammate was able to make some contact with the screen. But hey, that's also a one and done championship game situation, is it often comes down to this, especially when you're a Houston team that makes games low possession. Each play at the end is going to have kind of a heightened importance. And again, it's been fun to talk about these, but I'm definitely going to be breaking it down on Patreon with film, which will be much easier for everyone to see it. So another plug for the Patreon, where we had so much content the last few weeks. I mean, I think we're at more than one post a day for the last couple of weeks. Yeah, there was just a mountain of content, and we got a lot of really nice messages from people who enjoyed that. Really, a lot of nice messages from people just generally about the last few years of talking about the team and having the podcast. So thank you to you as well if you took the time to send a message.
Yeah, look, thanks everybody so much. We got a lot of messages too from people in the last 2 days. I love some of them were like, "Hey, thank you guys for making the tougher years bearable." People telling us that they learned a lot about basketball from us, which I know means a lot to both of us. A couple tweets were like, "I feel like Florida Basketball Hour won the national championship too." Which, yeah, it felt a little bit like that to some extent. It was, look, it was incredible. I never expected that this Florida team would win the national championship. I thought they'd be pretty good. I did. And we'll get Jake Winderman back from America's favorite network, the Network of Stars, at some point, and get him on Florida Basketball Hour, and we can talk to Jake and Wendy's winners, and we can talk about how, like, at least I think I had us in the Sweet 16. So, like, I thought that they were a second weekend team this year. A lot of things had to go right to win the national title. That's every program ever. But I want to put some perspective on it, and I want to say thank you to all the people who subscribe to the Patreon. There will be plenty of stuff in the portal, patreon.com/FloridaBB Hour. And I want to put some perspective on it too. Also want to thank our sponsor at Sandberg Phoenix. If you have any sort of civil or business litigation needs, or you're in the NIL space and you need help with compliance, or you need help with pre-recruiting negotiations, which are now legal, go ahead and give them a call. They're in Missouri, they're in Illinois, and they are in Florida. So thanks to those guys at Sandberg Phoenix. Thanks to all our Patreon subscribers. You guys are incredible. Pat Young, one of our Patreon subscribers, Gator Great, sent a message and said, "It's incredible that they won the national title and didn't even play their best game in the NCAA tournament." So I'll give Fawcett a minute to kind of opine on that, and then maybe provide some wider perspective on some thoughts I had.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it straight up. I certainly don't feel like Florida played 40 minutes of their best basketball. I do think there's something to be said about just the style that Florida plays that is going to lend itself to being a little bit more non-linear. I of course joked about the Walter Clayton turnovers alongside the Walter Clayton experience of knocking out a bunch of shots in a row. So there's always going to be a little bit of that with Florida, and the way they play fast means that you're going to turn the ball over sometimes, which is going to make for a couple minutes of dead time. But it also means you can put up points in a hurry. So to some extent, the style that Florida plays is always going to lend itself to, like, they're not like a slow, methodical get set and just like play rock solid basketball all the time, but not have explosion. Like, yeah, there's some boomer bust the way Florida plays, but yeah, it's just really easy to it's really easy to go back to previous national champions, go look at their route to the final, and even by looking at like box scores and win probabilities, you can see that they've had one or two or more breaks, and then there's always the things that are a little bit intangible. So again, like someone 15 years from now might pull up Ken Palm and just see that Florida blasted Maryland, and they're not going to necessarily know that they had a coach with one foot out the door, which again, like, is why it's also fun to have people that write about sports. That's why I think that journalists and people who cover sports are important to tell those kinds of stories that the stats don't always tell. But yeah, it's one of those things that, again, that's why I always want to be careful when I know some people will think if I point out that there's things I think when were lucky breaks for the Gators, that I'm not trying to detract, because again, every national champion, or at least most of them had some moments of luck or things break their way. And again, I mean, Florida did have to play good teams the whole way. They didn't get the benefit of some Cinderella team that ran out of steam in the Sweet 16. So yeah, I'm certainly not saying it was all lucky for the Gators, but when you do talk about this team, it's also going to be funny because, again, people are going to talk about where this team is in terms of some of the best teams ever, some of the best championships ever, or at least in the last 20 years or whatever. It'll be an interesting counterpoint for those who are going to say they didn't even play their best basketball and they won. And there's going to be some people who are like, yeah, they won, but like, they were kind of sloppy. They never had that like fully overwhelming 40 minutes of dominant. But it's almost like a fun quirk of this team, and I think it's honestly something that people like. I think that there'd be and I know a lot of people will take a championship, however a championship comes, but I bet if a lot of people could have their pick between a Virginia and the way that Virginia won their championship, we're talking about a team that had some lucky breaks and near misses. That was Virginia for sure. But again, a team that did play a little bit slower and more methodical and just played like 40 really good minutes of basketball every single game. Or a team like Florida that had just crazy roller coaster up and downs. It would have been frustrating if Florida lost, but they didn't. And I think a lot of people love the run. And I know that maybe a lot of people's heart rates and organs are worse off because of it, but it is also something that's going to be really special for looking back on this team and the way that they could dig themselves some holes but get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. Look, Florida. So the counterpoint, I guess, to the breaks, and they got some luck. I mean, look, Walter Clayton hit a video game shot. He very easily could have missed that shot too, right? He made the plays, but some of those shots. And this is a point that Gary Parrish got a lot of crap for at CBS from Gator fans. And I get it, because Gary picked Florida to lose in every single round, starting with the UConn game. So Gary deserves some lip, right? He does. That's something Jake Winterman and I were actually discussing. Like, man, Gary deserves to be ribbed a little bit. He picked the national champion to lose 5 games in a row. That's not great, Bob. But like, I guess my point on that isn't so much to bury Gary as much as to point out that, like, while every team needs breaks, Florida also, did make some preposterous shots. And that was one of Gary Parrish's points about, the Texas Tech game, and Walter Clayton making NBA style falling sideways Steph Curry threes to beat UConn. Like, so, Florida had Walter Clayton and other teams didn't. And so that is a big reason that they made the national title game. And then the supporting cast gets that victory. So yeah, Florida was fortunate. The flip side of that is No team since the 1993 North Carolina Tar Heels had a tougher, no champion had a tougher seed path. Florida seed path was 33 total number of seeds. That's one above the maximum, or that it could have been. They played an 8. They played a 4. They played a 3. They played the top overall seed, and then they played a 1 in the final for 33. That's the first time that had happened since 93 North Carolina. They also had a 39-year-old head coach who had to face Danny Hurley, the best coach in the effing sport. Just ask him. Bruce Pearl, Kelvin Sampson. So 2 Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers in the Final Four, a future Hall of Famer in the second round. Let's just do perspective on it. So Florida's second run in 07, Matt Painter would probably, depending on what you think of Thad Matta, Matt Painter's probably the best coach that Billy Donovan had to deal with. And by the way, that was Florida's most competitive game. It was in the second round. They had Butler. It was in between Brad Stevens and what's the other guy? Whatever. Todd Licklider was coaching Butler. So it wasn't quite, they weren't quite the Brad Stevens era, right? I think Brad was on that staff. But they had Ben Howland at UCLA, which I don't think Ben's a bad coach, but like he ain't Bruce Pearl, right? He ain't Danny Hurley. So Florida got a lot of teams that can scheme you. They played a lot of different styles that aren't necessarily conducive to what you think of when you think of Florida being at their best. And Florida won. Like Florida was like, I'm your Huckleberry. They won over and over again, regardless of style, regardless of opponent. They played in Raleigh, Maryland. Yes, distracted by their coach. But Maryland's played in Seattle, right? So they got the win over Colorado State, and then they flew right to San Francisco from Seattle. Florida flew home to Gainesville, which was a choice. They didn't have to. But then they flew across the country to San Francisco. They arrived a day after Maryland. They had to acclimate, and they dominated them. So, they're it's give and take. To me, the main takeaway from this national championship, Florida's third, is what it says about Florida as a program, just generally, right? That they can win national titles under 2 different staffs. They can go to Final Fours under 3. You guys, if you guys listen to the pod, you know the numbers I can rattle off. You've seen me tweeting about them. You've seen me chirping a little bit. Top 10 in win percentage this century. So as long as UF invests in basketball, as long as they pay the staff what the staff should be paid, UF should never be 11th in the SEC in staff salary, man. That's embarrassing. Do better. You have 3 national titles. That's 3 times more than anybody in the SEC this century. It's 1 more than Kentucky has in the Ken Palm era. Shout out Tubby Smith and the 98 Wildcats. Do better. Do better than 11th. Invest, institutionally commit. Because when the right staff is at Florida, this program is in a different tier than everybody in the SEC except for Kentucky. Because Kentucky's a blue blood. Florida doesn't have to care about whether they're called a blue blood or not. All that stuff is fan fiction anyway. Doesn't matter. Is UConn a blue blood? They have 6 natties. At what point do they graduate from not good in the 80s to blue blood, right? So Florida's awesome. The program's incredible. A 3rd national championship is incredible. They were the best team in the SEC in the best year of the SEC ever. They didn't win the SEC championship, but man, they won the SEC tournament. They beat the SEC champion twice, and neither win was a fluke. And they cut down nets, and they're going to hang a 3rd banner. So to me, Jared just asked how many different coaches have won a national title at Duke. I thought it was 2, Jared, but you're probably right. Did Krzyzewski win all 5 of them?
Uh,
I mean, if Krzyzewski won all 5 of them, yeah, I did. Mike might have won all 5 of them. I know they went to the Final Four before Mike. That's why they were going to fire Mike in year 3, right? And at Carolina, Frank McGuire won a natty, Dean won natties, Roy won natties, somebody else won a natty. A little, but man, I don't know, Fawcett. I mean, it's so impressive. And 36-4, I wrote the column Saturday Down South SEC basketball team. I think this Florida team is the best SEC basketball team to play, at least in the KenPom era. Now, the KenPom data bears that out for me, so it's not like I'm limb. But unreal. National champs.
Yeah, so I mean, speaking of KenPom, I was looking at some of the national championship runs, and again, because the combined seed total is a good way to go for sure. I do think there is some like anecdotal, like I just wanted to look at some of the paths too, and the only one, or the first one I got to that I thought was like at least at all comparable, was Villanova in 2016. They played Iowa in the first, or in the round of 32. They were 23rd in KenPom. So again, kind of a tough spot. They had Peter Jacques and Jared Uthoff, which again, people who really know college basketball remember that team was really good. Then they played Miami with Angel Rodriguez, who I loved, and Sheldon McClellan, Davon Reed. Thought that team was really good. Then they played Kansas with Perry Ellis and Frank Mason and Wayne Selden and Carlton Bragg, who I coached 2 years ago with the Edmonton Stingers. So that team is good. Then Oklahoma with Buddy Hield, and then North Carolina with Bryce Johnson, Kennedy Meeks, Justin Jackson, Marcus Page, Joel Berry. So that's I'm not trying to make a total, but I'm just saying like that's the first one where I was like, okay, that path is, one that I would like even consider in the same kind of realm. There's pretty lean years from the years on. In terms of like best SEC teams ever, I will say I still look at the 2007 Gators, and like I just think that college basketball was at the highest level I think it's ever been at that point. And like, while this isn't maybe a fair comparison to make, the fact that a couple months after the game is done, or maybe that's whatever, 6 months later, like Joakim Noah and Al Horford and Corey Brewer were all starters at the NBA level. Like that's just like, that's incredible. And I just think like the talent at the level of the sport was a lot higher at the time. So like, which again is another thing that like makes this Florida team amazing. Florida wins a championship. One of their players is incredible. And now everyone's just like, oh, do you think Walter Clayton can like maybe get in as the into the first round of the draft like that, which again is just like much different than the sport in 2007, where it was like Florida's 3 players are NBA starters in the fall. So I would still lean that I think that team is better than Florida's, but I also can. I don't think it's at all outrageous for all the reasons that you've laid out, both right now and in the past, and that people think if you want to say this team, given the strength of the league, obviously the SEC was not the SEC back then. It's just like, to me, looking at the talent on that UCLA team, the Florida beat. It's just the sport was in just such a different place, where Florida has guys that would have been first round picks that were. Or lottery picks that were like, hey, let's run it back for one more year at Florida. That'd be fun. That just, of course, would. That just doesn't have. So yeah, that's probably where I probably still land at 2007 being a better team. But again, I don't think it's at all a crazy take at all to say that this team would be the best.
Yeah, I mean, this team may end up with 3 first-round draft picks. It's just a matter of when. We'll see where that is. I haven't looked at the NBA Draft Net consensus, and this is probably Patreon content, so I don't want to go too long or too much longer. But
yeah, long day for you. Yeah, Neil, when was your flight from San Antonio?
I went to bed. Yeah, I went to bed at like 2 and got back here, and I slept like 4 hours. Gator fans that know remember Ron Zook will remember that the Zooker used to say that he slept fast. And so that was just like sleeping 8 hours. And I can tell you that is not true. And that Ron Zook well, among the many things he got wrong were his takes on sleep. But yeah, like when I see Will Riley going 16th in the NBA draft to the Orlando Magic and like Walt Clayton not going in that spot, like I have to chuckle at least a little bit. Like, first of all, like the Magic fan base would just riot if they took a project guard with Walt Clayton available. Second of all, like, come on. Like, you really think Will Riley makes a bigger impact in the NBA in his first 3 years than Walter Clayton? Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? If that's your take. And I'm not saying I agree with like Jay Williams, who I think was saying like he would take Walt like 3rd overall the other day. I'm pretty sure that's what he said. He said he would take him in the ace spot.
Honestly, I didn't see him say it, but I saw a ton of people tweeting it.
Well, I'm not wrong, right? That's what he said.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, I just didn't see. I know a lot of people are saying that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it sounds like something he would say.
Yeah.
And again, I'm seeing the people in the comments talking to me about how like I didn't.
Yeah,
I didn't
like he said, like
Chris Richard.
I've been on the floor with him. I saw it.
Oh yeah, but yeah, I just want to say like not only did Florida have those guys obviously get drafted, but they literally stepped like from day one in the NBA, like those guys all started more than half of their games. Like, so even if say Condon declared for the draft and was a 1st round pick, and Walter Clayton got drafted in the 1st round, and Will Richard got drafted in the 1st round. I mean, hey, maybe I'm wrong, but like I don't think those guys come in and are all like starters as rookies. I think Al Horford was 10-10 as a rookie. Yeah, like I just like that is just,
yeah, he was rookie of the year.
That's crazy. That level of talent from that 2007 team. And, but again, I also hate when people use NBA success as a way to like go back and evaluate college teams. But I do think just in the context of looking at their rookie years, to just say like, look at these guys that were able to step in right away speaks to the talent level. And it's also like, I'm talking talent level of that Florida team, but it's also like, it obviously, that wasn't a team that was like, wow, what a collection of talent. They also like played obviously incredible together, as everyone listening knows. And yes, as Jared Philmayer confirms here, yes, he said that he would take Flag number 1 and Walter Clayton number 2. So we'll see what happens on draft night.
He said he'd take him after Cooper Flag. He said he'd take him after Cooper Flag. And you know what? If somebody wants to do that, good for Walt. Good for Walt, man. But like, I'll tell you this. I'll think of something funny to do on the Patreon that doesn't make me look too ridiculous, but is still silly. If Will Riley gets drafted ahead of Walter Clayton Jr. All right. I will. And I will say this. And I don't know if I'll get pushback on this or not. I think Walter Clayton Jr. is the greatest Florida player of all time. I think he is. Like, I think, first of all, Florida doesn't win this national championship without him. Now, do they win the 2006 Natty without Joakim Noah? Probably not. Like, Joakim Noah just went on an absolute furious heater in the NCAA tournament. I think he had like 20 block shots in the NCAA tournament. It was the record until Donovan Clingan existed. And so, like, you could make an argument for Joakim, but like the KenPom numbers aren't comparable. Like Walt Clayton, just an efficiency monster in ways that like Noah was impactful, right? But he played in a less good league, and he was still not as impactful in all the regular season games. He had a monster 06 tournament. His 07 tournament was kind of quiet, other than he had a monstrous game in the Final Four. and he was massive in the Sweet 16 game against Butler. Like he was the one guy they didn't really have an answer for. But because they played Florida great that year. That might have been Brad too, by the way. I think Licklider had left. Point is, no, that was Licklider. I already went through that. So look, like Walt scored at a prolific rate to where he was a top 10, 15 scorer in Florida history in just 2 seasons. He put up 30 points and 34 points in the Elite Eight and the Final Four. First player since Larry Bird to do that. And Fawcett knows I love me some Larry Bird. Sometimes it's like 10:30 at night on a random September day, and I'll just be like, let me hit up Fawcett with some Larry Bird videos. So we all know how much I like me some Larry Bird. 30 and 34, first player since Larry Bird to do that in the NCAA tournament. There's the heater he went on against Colorado last year, where he almost willed Florida back from 13 down in like the last 4 minutes of an NCAA tournament game then. Like we all saw, maybe we all should have seen this coming. He won the SEC tournament, and he was first team All-SEC, and he's the program's first consensus first team All-American, and now he's a national champion. Like, I'm sorry, he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT of Florida players. And if you do think the 07 or the 06 teams are better, then he's definitely the GOAT, because your argument would be like, well, Joe Kim was awesome, but he played next to Al Horford, who still plays in the NBA, and Corey Brewer, who played in the NBA for a decade, and the most prolific three-point shooter in the history of the NCAA tournament, right? Like, you know, I don't know. Maybe Tommy Houck will end up being that good, but Walter Clayton is the GOAT for me. Just an incredible 2-year run, as Jared points out here in the comments. And you know, obviously, look at the difference between Rick Pitino and Todd Golden right now is that Rick Pitino went to St. John's and couldn't get Walter Clayton to go there, so he lost to John Calipari in the second round of the NCAA tournament, and Florida cut down nets.
Yeah, like the Joakim Noah argument would be like, and again, you did reference like Ken Palm numbers, where of course Walter Clayton is more impactful. Then if you're like, okay, now let's talk about the other side of the floor. Well, like, you know, what are we even talking about if we're going Joakim Noah defense versus Walter Clayton defense? So that you could make that would be, of course, the one kind of
no, for sure,
the whole. Or if someone was a Joakim Noah, in addition to saying like, well, he was like a really good player and Florida's best player in 2 championship years, and again, you could just for impact on both sides of the floor. I think there's a pretty good Joakim Noah argument. And again, one thing that's like crazy, and I hate to be arguing against the clear candidacy of Walter Clayton. I'm just trying to bring up a different view. But like when you look at Walter Clayton's year to year performance, like again, just like looking at the Ken Palm numbers, because it's easy to jump up. So he took a very similar amount of shots, similar amount of possessions. He improved his effective field goal percentage by 3%. That is like, while that doesn't sound like a lot, that's like a nice boost for sure. Just under 2% improvement on true shooting. His assist rate got 8% better. That was the biggest improvement for sure. But again, when you look at some of those other, like he certainly took a step up, but it wasn't actually, I don't feel like Walter Clayton was like that much better a player this year than he was last year, but the infrastructure around him was obviously much better. So and again, I'm not saying that Florida fell short last year because of Walter Clayton, but he was a very important piece of that team too that didn't have as much of a great season. So again, we're also kind of arguing, you'd also be arguing semantics a little bit about like, did he have the greatest like season ever versus the greatest Florida career?
Yeah.
And then you get into, of course, like 2 years versus some 3 or 4 year guys. So I don't know. I do think you could have, there's a fairly compelling argument for Joakim Noah, which would, but again, that's probably the only one I could argue. And I know people who've listened for a number of years will know that I don't really have the proper respect for basketball pre-integration or really pre
Yeah.
like 1985. So obviously Florida also had some very 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 dominant players prior to that maybe I'm just not giving enough respect to, but I will just be very open with my bias and say that I am not considering those teams slash those players who, again, not to disrespect them, they were fantastic. But if we're talking the best ever, I do think unless I'm somehow missing something obvious to me, it's Joakim Noah or it's Walter Clayton. And I'd be interested. Maybe that's poll fodder for you at some point on the Florida
Yeah.
Basketball Hour account at some point this offseason. Maybe either right now or in the complete dog
No,
days.
I love that.
You need content with that.
Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, one other argument for Walt is he changed positions. And like I know, I think Todd Golden was adamant about like, oh, he's not getting enough credit for this. Like we placed an entirely different set of demands on him, and they did. And even in the national championship game, what do you have? 8 assists last night? He had 7 or 8. Yeah, I mean, he had 7 or 8. He had 9 in the win at Auburn. He had 6 in the SEC championship game. He had to switch from playing off the ball with Zion Pullen to being the orchestrator of the offense. And was he perfect at that? Of course not. Like, he had his performance art turnovers per game, no doubt. But it is not easy to make that adjustment and then win the national championship. So I think, I think Eric's right. I think it has to be like Joakim Noah or Walter Clayton. And I just think Walt, like, I guess I can't divorce myself from the fact that Joakim Noah played next to Al Horford. I guess that's really what it is. And I don't know who that Horford type figure is on Florida. Like, I think Tommy Houck is really good. I think he's going to play in the NBA for 10 years. But, outside of Tommy, like, I don't know who that guy is right now. That's a decade in the association. And Joakim played with 2 of them. So, yeah. Anyway, the Florida Gators are your 2025 national champions. Thank you all. Just an incredible ride. Thank you all for all your support. Please go to patreon.com/FloridaBB Hour. We celebrated tonight. I know the staff celebrated today. The portal is open. It's been open. Everybody's got to get to work. I saw Malik Grady. I was giving him some crap because he's posting about the portal already. And, I know he can walk and chew gum at the same time. But I said, can you just give us a day? Can you get me some sleep before we talk about the portal a little bit? So we'll get back to all that. But
yeah, Neil, there was spirited Houck at the 3 debate going on Twitter today already about roster construction for the upcoming season. Good or bad. Houck at the 3. So, but yeah, I do think it's important to note for those of you who are already subscribing to us on Patreon and those of you that are about to subscribe after listening to this. Yeah, I mean, don't get caught going into next season not knowing about Florida's incoming players. About how important the portal is and how important these guys that are incoming are going to be to Florida basketball. The only way to truly know is to watch film. And that's what we're going to do on the Patreon of Florida's incoming transfers. You are going to be more informed than any of your friends who are box score watching to know who Florida is.
And freshmen.
Going to be getting it. And freshmen. Good point. So, we will certainly be doing a bunch of that. I've got some ideas that we're going to also do. I mean, Neil mentioned this actually on another podcast that we're going to do. And now that is, a good track. Didn't think we'd be talking so much 2007 Gators today, but we're going to be doing some rewatches of great games in Florida's history with, again, a little bit of, break it down analysis. So we'll watch the championship games, the back-to-back. I think one I was just remembering, Neil, was the PK80 game against Gonzaga. That would be just a fun one to rewatch and have a little watch along party with that. Of course, maybe the Wisconsin game in Don't want to watch the crushing Elite Eight defeat, I don't think. But we're just like, hey, if there's a great game in recent Florida or not so recent Florida, we'll be rewatching and doing some fun stuff, and that's just some of the stuff. But needless to say, the off season content will be still rolling, not at the same post a day, like long post every day thing that we've been doing in the NCAA tournament, but there will be a lot of content that is going to be worth subscribing for. And also, if you are just dying for podcast content, especially in the summer where the podcast will be a little bit less like pressing, like it's not like there's like a game on Saturday and we're podcasting on Thursday night. So I would imagine me and Neil are also going to be putting the podcast up on Patreon a couple days earlier than they're going to hit the regular feed. So even with the regular podcast that will be out for free, the Patreon supporters will get that plenty earlier than everyone else. So just did want to note that for all of you that are that have subscribed and all of you that are about to subscribe.
Absolutely. It's going to be lit. The one we're definitely going to do, because Eric just brought this, we're going to do the Jimmer Fredette Kenny Boyden game in the Sweet 16.
Oh, good call.
We're definitely, because that's one I know people still talk about in both programs, and it was just an absolute instant classic. And I mean, I would even do the damn Louisville game in the Elite Eight because it was such a fantastic game, even though Florida lost. And I think those teams were like 2 and 3 in KenPom or something preposterous. But whatever, we should definitely do the Jimmer game. Look, y'all, this has been special. Again, I know I've said thank you a lot, but I really mean it. What an incredible ride. What a privilege to cover this team. We have a show to do. So I know at times people are like, do you even think they're good? And it's like, of course we do. Like it's picking at little tiny things that made the difference between, whether they could get to the Final Four or not. And then they did. And again, they won every possible style. They won in every way. They won 36 basketball games, and they're your 2025 national champions. So, what an incredible story. Go Gators. Keep attacking closeouts.